Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Hey, welcome, guys. I'm so grateful to see you all here. This is the first night of our potluck and testimony night. We're super excited about this, the first of many. Um, the first Wednesday of every month, we have a potluck. We have a testimony. Tonight's is a real special one. It's our own Mason Mastera. It's the testimony is a very, very special thing. I always, whenever I hear a testimony, I always think about the woman at the well. In John chapter 5, Jesus comes and meets this woman at the well in Samaria, and he has a interesting and riveting and, and exposing conversation with this woman that ends with him letting her know that he knows her better than anybody on this planet does, and in ways that he never should have been able to. Uh, he reveals to her himself and reveals to her that he is God. He truly is, and he's been here the entire time. And it was not a revelation of judgment. It wasn't a revelation of criticism. It was a revelation of love, and it allowed her to recognize that this man is something special. And the response that she had was sprinting into the city of Samaria and going and getting everybody, telling everybody. She said, "Come and see a man who just told me everything that I've ever done. A man who come and see a man who knows me better than I even know myself." And that's the reality of our testimony. As we have a face-to-face encounter with the Lord, and we come to the understanding and the revelation that he is the Christ, the Son of God, man, and he's been there all along. And it's always a special testimony when you see these situations, these lives, these examples of a life that, by all rights and by the world's standard, is pretty good. Mason Mastera is an example of somebody who had it figured out. I'm not going to, kind of take over his testimony here, but I'm always so excited to hear testimony. We're so used to hearing the ones of somebody crumpled up into a ball in a corner with life spit you out, and you gave your life to Christ, and it's powerful and it drops your jaw. Of course it does. But then you hear those testimonies of individuals that had it figured out. All American, made the right moves, had it going, according to the world, in all the right direction. But then the Lord does what he does, and he starts to poke, and he starts to prod, and he starts to show us some stuff that we just can't shake off. And after we start digging a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper, we finally find the face of the Christ, the Son of the living God, and there's no turning back. And it's an amazing thing. I'm really excited to be able to introduce. I have the luxury. I have this is my brother-in-law. So I've heard. I've got an opportunity to hear the story. Not only hear the story, be part of the story and be along for a lot of the rides. So it's been a really special opportunity for me to announce Mason, especially. But to also live life with him, serve the Lord alongside him, and just to be able to have a front row seat to what God has done in his life. So I want to, as you guys can see, we're both up here, and I want to ask Mason a couple of questions. I'm gonna turn it over to him. You guys hear me talk enough. But I want to get into his story. I want to get into what the Lord has done as we boast upon all the goodness and all the beauty that God turns our lives into, from the trash they were to the treasure that he has the ability to do. So, Mason, start with us. Let us know. You grew up right here in Maine, right? You grew up right here in Maine. Of course, I know your parents. They're my in-laws now. But tell us, when you were growing up, when you came up in this world, when you came up as a child, was God part of the story? Did you have that aunt or uncle or next door neighbor or family member that exposed you to the gospel, that led you to Christ, that allowed you to have an experience of God throughout your story?
So, take it way back. I was probably around 7 years old. I think, yeah, about that age. So, I lived with my parents, lived in my grandmother's house. She's passed away now, but I remember praying. Some of my earliest memories. My grandmother, that side of the family, they were Catholic, and we used to pray before I went to bed every single night, and it was a habit that stuck with me through my whole entire life as a kid. Even up through, I didn't, my parents didn't lay me down. We kept praying, but it was just something that I just kept doing my whole entire life, and so that's when I was introduced to the Lord when I was a kid. But so I kind of fell off, right? So my parents weren't super religious. Let me think here. Get this sorted out. So growing up, moved around a lot. Went to all the different schools. Kind of fell in with whatever crowd I get into. It's kind of rough coming up. My parents, relatively all over the place. My dad worked all the time. My mother, stay-at-home mom, 2 older brothers, really gave her the runaround every chance that they got. Us kids, out doing the thing, and
So your sister Miranda, you got a sister Miranda Morgan, right? Those are the 2 younger sisters, and you've got Jamie and Johnny are your older brothers. You guys grew up right around here. Your father worked at Shaw Brothers, running heavy machinery, your whole life. So what was it like growing up with your siblings? Did you guys get into a lot of trouble? What did childhood look like for you guys?
yeah, we just kind of got into a lot of trouble, really. Thank you. It's really tough. We're really all over the place. Because we moved around so much, we couldn't really find a place, right? So constantly in and out of all the different schools. And
What was school like for you? Were you a good kid? Were you a good student? Did you play sports?
never really played sports. Didn't play a lot of sports. I wasn't a good student. I was incredibly behaviorally challenged, um, to say the least. I got in about as much trouble as I could. I was disrespectful to about everybody I came across. I got diagnosed with ADHD at a very early age. A lot of stuff was going on at home. Thankfully, the Lord, he saw me through it. He kept me out of some really bad, some really hairy scenarios. I ended up going up through high school. I met my beautiful wife. It was freshman year. Used to sit next to her in math class and pay absolutely no attention to the math. I stayed in that school. That was Socopee Valley. That was Corners. So I stayed in that school up until junior year. Junior year, I ended up moving to Greeley. I went to Greeley High School. That was in North Yarmouth. So I graduated Greeley, and I started working. Doing construction with my dad. I mean, it was going well. I was making money. Things were happening. But I fell into a rut. Fell into a real deep rut. And I was in a situation where I was just working. I was working for money. I was spending my money. I was coming home. One of my biggest problems, I spent all my money on stuff that didn't matter. That was what I used. That was my thing in my life where I would try and fill that void, that void of God, right? because I wasn't following him. I wasn't doing the right thing. I wasn't a Christian. No one was exposing me to it. Nobody was talking to me about it. So I spent all my money. Anything. I was a real materialist. Anything I could get my hands on, I would buy nice things and in hopes of happiness. That did not work out. So one day I was at work, and I got a message on Facebook from a recruiter, a recruiter for the Marine Corps. And for some reason, I've gotten plenty of messages from recruiters up to that point, and for some reason at that point in time, I was pretty sick of work. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go in. I'm going to go talk to the recruiter. So it was a big pivot point in my life. I ended up going into the Marine Corps. I went into the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, so up to that point, I was besides being, a relatively punk kid, I was really blessed. My dad was a really, in terms of world standards, I love my dad. No disrespect to my parents. But so in terms of world standards, my dad, anybody knew him, was a very moral man, right? The truth is the truth. You don't lie. You don't do anything like that. A lot of morals derived from the Bible. So I adopted a lot of the same qualities. I'm pretty much a spitting image of my dad. So the world, kind of looked at me in a certain light. I got treated really good. I got treated really good by everybody around me. The world, in world standards, I was kind of going up and up and kind of being put on a pedestal. So I ended up going into the Marine Corps, and it really built on. I had some desirable traits when it came to the Marine Corps. I was, confrontational, right? I was confrontational. I was, very outspoken, lead from the front kind of guy, help the people in the back, the whole nine. But it made me, the Marine Corps, it plays on some relatively dark qualities for men. It made me really mean, really, really mean. And so I went through the Marine Corps, made me, more rough around the edges. At the end of the Marine Corps was when really big things happened in my life. Really big things. I had a conversation with my buddy about, one of my really good friends, his name's Tauntaun, about abortion. And at that point in time, now this is relatively controversial, but it's really, a very important conversation in my life. I believed in abortion at that time. I had seen a lot of children, who were born into incredibly terrible circumstances, and with the world's, the way that the world thinks, the way that I thought at that time, I was like, why would you ever want to bring anybody into the world who's going to be brought into really bad circumstances? Save them the pain, right? That's what I thought. I had a conversation with a buddy. He's a Christian man, and he was explaining, well, you got to take into consideration, what about, certain individuals who brought into really bad circumstances, but the Lord does some pretty incredible things, like he's done to just about everybody here, right, and brought people out of the dust. Some of the absolute lowest, right, some basket cases, right, and does some really incredible things, brings them really high, uses the low things to just completely confound the world. And we had a conversation, and he explained some stuff like that, and I had heard some testimonies like that, and I just realized, this truth that he's preaching to me, it's irrefutable. I couldn't come up with nothing. I couldn't come up with absolutely anything to peel apart the argument that he was giving to me. And this is a really important thing, because up until that point in my life, I was looking for two things. I was looking to be a good husband, and I was looking to be a good dad, right? And I, was getting to the point where I was starting to understand, what makes somebody good, morals. Where do morals come from? I didn't have an answer for that question, but I was pretty close, because me and my friend had a conversation, and he had some truth that was, blew my top off. So I was close, and obviously we had a conversation. He's a Christian man, so he told me all about Christ. He told me all about God, and he started, putting things. The Lord was using him to put things into place for me, give me a significantly better understanding. significantly better understanding up
Yeah.
at that point in time.
Okay, so at this time, you're in the Marines. You've met this friend. He's evangelizing to you, whether you know it at this time or not.
Yep.
He's evangelizing to you. The Lord speaking through this man into your heart. He's setting the stage because we know and this is what he does, right? He sets the stage. He sets us up for what he's about to do in our lives. So you come home from the Corps, right? You come home from the Marine Corps, and this is around the time that my life and yours kind of intercede. Because while Mason's in the Marine Corps, I've now come along and married his sister. By the way, me and Mason might be brothers and the best of friends now. It was not the case. Because while Mason was this black and white, this is 1 + 1 = 2 kind of guy, Aaron was just coming out of a 20-year drug addiction, 10 years in prison, being sanctified by the Lord, which did not really wasn't noticeable to everybody in those early days. It didn't look much different than it was. So when Aaron and Miranda decided within 3 days' notice that we were going to get married, because the Lord had been convicting us of the fact that we were living in sin, and we had just started going back to church, and we got married about a month in, and Mason heard about it, and he had some choice words. But some time had gone by, and me and Miranda had now been married for quite some time, and I'd say a little over a year, about a year and a half, 2 years. Lincoln has of course been born, and I've now gone and enrolled into the school of ministry, which for anybody who doesn't know, it's a 1-year unpaid internship into a Calvary Bangor through the Calvary Residential Discipleship Program, School of Ministry to follow. It's a 2-year course if you go the school ministry route. And so that's what me and his sister and his new nephew had now gone on to do. Mason came home, and he's living about a half hour from where we are. And this is where me and his lives now intersect, where I really hadn't known Mason very well before this. He had like I said, been in the Marine Corps. Been kind of just the all-American brother that did not agree with our decision to get married, and now so now you're in Stockton Springs, correct?
Yep.
You're living out there. We're living in Orrington. You're working. You're doing your thing. Where are you at now?
So now don't tell my wife this, but how I ended up, up that way, up in Stockton Springs, was I had met a girl while I was in the Marine Corps, and I'm only putting this in my testimony while she's sitting right here because the Lord used He used things in my life to really set me up. So while I was in the Marine Corps, I started talking to this girl. I started dating this girl. I started chasing this girl after I got out of the Marine Corps. We've been dating for a few years. And I made my way up to finally got to Stockton Springs. I was inching my way up there from my parents' house. At this time, parallel to me, Aaron was in CRD. He was going through the program. He was going into the school ministry. It's really important because the Lord used both of our lives. We were sent on this parallel trajectory. And their testimonies were absolutely pivotal in my testimony. So, talking to this girl, tried to become a police officer, and it didn't work out at all. Everything started falling apart. I had an apartment, bills weren't getting paid. Everything was just, he wasn't letting me get ahead, per se. So that being said, wasn't letting me get ahead. Things started falling apart, and then so I tried to become a police officer, and the Lord explained, it didn't work out, and I was sitting there, I was wondering why. It's a really big thing that the Lord spoke to me. He kept it really simple because that's the way the Lord is, the way He does it. He said, you want to go out there and you want to save lives. You want to save the physical bodies, right? You want to get on the street. And what I had for you, that this time I was going to church. I was seeing Miranda and Aaron very often, and that was they were just rubbing off on me, their love and watching them change. And the Lord spoke. He says, that's not what I have for you. I don't want you out there saving physical bodies. I want you to go, and I want you to save souls. I want you to preach to people. I want you to tell them about the good news. I want you to tell them about me. It was a huge thing. So everything started falling apart. That girlfriend is now an ex-girlfriend. Obviously, now I'm happily married. Thank the Lord. And thankfully, she took me back. I don't know why. So the Lord made it super clear to me, going to church up in Bangor, up in Orrington, this is where I want you to be, right? He went through this program, CRD, which is an incredible program for anybody watching this. If you have any kind of struggles, it is the place to be. So he went through this program and married Miranda, and they had their son Lincoln. And so I have two older brothers who are drug addicts. And up until that point in my life, when Aaron went to CRD, I had never in my life seen a drug addict change. Never once, right? I've seen people switch one addiction for the other, right? And really, that's the bulk of it, right? I've seen just, they switch an addiction for the other. But who they are doesn't change. What's on the inside doesn't change. Some people cover it up. They make it look a lot better, manipulate this, that, whatever else. I've been around these people my whole entire life. And I say these people only because at that point in time, I didn't know who I was, right? But so I had been around these people my whole entire life. And Aaron changes. Miranda changes. My sister, she wasn't a drug addict, but we grew up in a rocky place, in a rocky house with not a lot of support. It wasn't, so we really veered off into different directions, but still off the path of God, right? Off that narrow path. And things were getting pretty scary. And more often than not, I was having conversations with Miranda about the wild decisions she was making. Thank God that he was in it, because nothing that I said worked. They changed. And when they changed, it turned my whole entire life upside down. Everything that I thought I knew, every stitch of truth that I thought was real, all of the wisdom that the world gave me, all that wisdom, right? It was all false. And I was exposed to something that was so true and so pure and so not common to the world. I had to know everything about it. I needed to know everything that there was. I needed to see what this was, what this thing is that's completely capable of changing somebody from the inside out. So the Lord spoke to me. He brought me to the foot of the church. I'm talking to the front end of the campus is where I spent almost every day, right? And then Aaron's, all these miraculous things are happening. And there was a Wednesday night service. Pastor Ken, he was talking about something, and the Lord was speaking to me right through him. That night, it felt like the Lord was using Pastor Ken and talking straight at me. He's looking at everybody. He has no idea what's going on, when it comes to what's going on in my heart, but it was straight to me. And I realized that, the Lord wants me to talk about his word, to preach to people, to explain to people what's really going on, all the important things in life. So, big things happen. I decide that I'm done. Everything's, I'm giving up everything. I'm going into CRD. I have a truck payment. I have things that don't add up. I got bills that are absolutely not going to get paid by me working. All these things that don't make sense. But at that point in time, the Lord helped me understand, it's a faithful endeavor, right? So do what you can. Sell that truck, right? And then go and do what I want you to do, and I'll take care of you. That's what he was that's what he was speaking to me. That's exactly what he did. I had to sell my truck. I went to my boss one day and told him, hey man, can I go to the dealerships and see if I can sell this truck? I had prayed about it like the day before. And this was just one of the miraculous things that the Lord did in this expansive time. I told him about that, and he says, yeah, how much do you want for it? I was like, my jaw dropped, hit the floor. He's like, what do you he's like, I'll buy it from you right now. I was like, okay, can you do $32,500? And he said, yes, I made money on the truck. And I got rid of the truck. The Lord was making it happen. Anything that stood in my path, I just prayed about it, gave it to the Lord, and he made it happen every time. It was insane. So I got rid of the truck. Amanda was on her way out. She was saying bye to Maine. She was going to live in the sunny state of Florida. I was So that girl had broken it off with me. We had separated. I was sitting. This is just a cool part, relatively romantic. I was sitting there, and something happened in my heart, and I just thought, I'm gonna text Amanda. So I texted Amanda. Big things happen. Big things happen. I was a little out of pocket, definitely out of pocket, but we started talking, and then things started happening there, and the Lord sorted everything out. Everything that started springing up between us, all the me being a terrible person and not knowing how to treat a woman right. He started fixing all that. And everything started drastically changing super quick. She ended up moving back from Florida on a dime. She came back to visit, and I think she left that Sunday, and that Monday she drove back, which is the craziest thing in the world. I don't know how, the Lord was in that. So she ended up coming back. Then I went into CRD. And then when I went into CRD, some really, really, really incredible things happened. Super incredible things happened. He started just giving me the truth. He started showing me everything. He first of all started with what the world had done to me. And it just showed me. He's like, man, you are not what you think you are. You do not have it that well, right? And obviously, the Lord is loving, but I was prideful. I was pride is enmity between man and God, and I had a boatload of it. I thought so highly of myself, and it was when I understood that I'm not saved by works. There's nothing I could do, right? I am in fact a sinful person. This is all the stuff that the Lord explained to me and through His Word. And He showed me that He loved me. You don't add up, but that's why I did what I did. And He started showing me these truths, and He started peeling stuff off of me. Layers just started falling. I was put in position. I went into CRD, so for that 3 months I was in the program, learning how to do the program, and then I went into the school of ministry. I was blessed to be able to do the school of ministry because I'm fresh at everything. And he put in a good word for me. John Fleming, he let me in. Pastor Ken, they all saw something in me, and they let me go in. I started doing the school of ministry, with a bunch of guys who are drug addicts and alcoholics and absolutely don't want anything to do with a Marine who has a pride problem and is their authority, right? So something huge happened there. So you have law versus grace, right? You have the law versus grace, and I was all law. My whole entire life, I was all law. My mother in the house was all law. And I am also a spitting image of my mother. So it's just the way it works. That's probably why we didn't get along. So I was all law, and the guys would not have nothing to do with me. They didn't want anything to do with me. They were, I was really messing things up. They were not responding well to me. They were super upset with me, and I was sitting there. I was like, guys, I love you so much. Why do you guys hate me? And it was when I realized, a lot of really dumb stuff. I had these expectations, these unrealistic expectations for these men. Clean your stuff. Don't smell bad. It was like they're all just came off the streets from doing drugs, super messed up. Like their personal hygiene, that was the last thing they thought about for the last 5 years. Like really big things and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, you can't just be selfless, And the Lord explained to me, a lot of communication with the Lord in this period of time. And He explained to me, He's like, dude, I brought these guys here so that you could tell them about me, and you could love them the way that I want them to be loved, right? I did not bring them here so that you could try to impose your expectations, your unrealistic expectations on these men and trying to turn them into the image that you think is acceptable, right? So please do what I asked you, right? And just love these men. That was insane to me. Everything flipped. When that happened and the Lord spoke that to me, everything flipped upside down. I stopped grilling people for not doing their dishes, right? I stopped yelling at people for not scrubbing the toilet after they were done with it. And miraculously, things started to get dramatically better. The men started to respect me. They started to love me, right? And I just started pouring into them. And really good things started to happen. I didn't have to tell them to clean their stuff. All I had to do was love them. And when they got the love, when they got what they needed from Christ through me, they started changing too. I changed, he changed, they changed, everybody was changing. It was all the love. It was all the grace of God. All the grace of God.
Yeah, so for anybody who's not familiar, the CRD program that Mason's talking about, it's a 1-year program for CRD program is for men. It's a 24-bed facility right there on the campus of Calvary Chapel, Orrington. It's for men who struggle with drugs, alcohol, sin of some sort. Typically, it's drugs and alcohol. It doesn't have to be. It's not restricted to that. But it's individuals that have had shackles tethering them to the world, and has left them unable to walk into a relationship with Christ. So this program, you live there for a year, and you go through a schedule, a regimented schedule, throughout the process of your day, which will lead into free time and gym time and things where you can kind of, write your own story throughout your day. But for the most part, you're being told when you got to be there, we're all done with that. You have certain times you can shower. I mean, it's regimented, right? So for a Marine coming into a scenario like this, specifically one who still is being sanctified and still sees the world as, well, why wouldn't you have your bed made? What kind of a man doesn't make his bed? The Lord happened to work that out. I remember we were down in Portland at the time, right? So Amanda and Mason were high school sweethearts. They were, they were together throughout high school, and then he went off to the Marines, and then they reconciled, as he said, when he came back during this season. So when Amanda, in her own testimony, the Lord started working in her life, brought her to faith in Christ, and completely flipped her world upside down, revealed to her that she could not have the relationship with him that she desired while she lived in Florida, that she needed to pack up everything and come up to Maine, which also required her disregarding about $20,000 in commission at the job that she had by leaving early. But she made that decision. She said, "I'm leaving. I know the Lord's calling me to come up there," and she came up and she lived with me and Miranda. And so I say all that to say, during the season, me and Miranda had left to go plant this church here. We were living in Portland at the time, but we are now living in Portland, but we are kind of vicariously going through this sanctification process with Mason, because of course we love him so much. Miranda and him are, Irish twins. They're a year apart, and best friends. So, and of course Amanda is, love struck down in Portland with us, she wanting to know everything that's going on with him. So we're following this story and we're watching this change happening in his life, as the Lord is taking a man who sees things black and white, who sees things as 1 + 1 = 2, and he's coming back and in this struggle and this kind of power struggle between the Mason and the Lord, and watching what the Lord does with the love and the grace and the gentle hand of discipline, where he pulls us from our flesh and starts drawing us into his spirit. And the phone calls started changing and the visits started changing to celebrating and testifying to the brilliance of what God is doing in these men's lives, and to the beauty of what he's showing them through individuals who months before they fought about taking showers, but now the last thing on his mind is a shower, because this guy just stayed up all night with him praying, right? And this guy was in tears because they got to pray about his kids being able to, have a phone call this Wednesday, and just the things that you watch the Lord does as he changes our perspective and he takes us from the trajectory we may have believed we were on. Even after becoming believers, a lot of times we will still stay on a trajectory that kind of we set the course, and the Lord, in his beauty and grace, will shift that. And when you see a man who is now riding passenger in the car with the Lord driving, it's a beautiful thing. So at this point now in the CRD and the school ministry, Mason has he's had this shift. He has taken his rightful position in the passenger seat and allowed the Lord to drive the vehicle that is his life. and he's just along for the ride, and he's just smile ear to ear every time you see him. Um, now you're about I don't know, about 6 months before you're getting ready to leave. You know that you're coming down here at that point. We'd already talked about this. You know you're coming down here, and now you're getting ready to shift out of school of ministry. What was that like? What's that like preparing to come out and come into full time ministry, get ready to marry your bride? You knew that was happening. Mason had to wait until the end of school ministry for them to get married. It was a rule in school ministry. You couldn't get married. You couldn't divide your almost I won't say allegiance, but your responsibilities. A man has a responsibility to his wife, and he had already made a commitment to the school ministry. So one of the rules they have is to don't divide that, because of course then you have to go and take care of your bride. So you guys were waiting to be able to get married. You knew that was on the horizon. You knew coming down here to serve in this church was on the horizon. You knew a whole new life was headed for you as you ended this chapter of school ministry. What was that like as you ended that chapter and began this one?
It was nerve-wracking. It was really nerve-wracking because I knew that there were going to be some really massive changes. So obviously, I had to be a husband. I didn't know how to be a husband successfully. I had no idea. I knew it was going to be. I knew it was going to be tough. I knew that there were a lot of things about myself that had to change. Just as in the school ministry, it was in the school ministry in that period of time. There was obviously the beginning to the end, and there was that point in the middle where everything changed. I started to strike a balance between the love and the discipline. And it took time, and there was a lot of heartache, and there was a lot of sorting myself out, in the sight of God with His help. And I knew that it was going to be the exact same way. I knew that it was going to be the exact same thing. I knew that I was going to start over. Everything that I had acquired there that the Lord had given me, I was going to get out, and I was going to do it again. And then with this ministry coming under Pastor Aaron and helping him with what's going on in this church, I knew that it was going to be a whole entire different ballgame. It was obviously some things fall in line with what had happened at CRD doing school ministry, but there was going to be a lot of change. And I was relatively nervous, but I had a lot of comfort. I had a lot of comfort because it wasn't me, If it was all me, I would have been significantly more nervous because, how am I going to do this? But it was at that point in time, the Lord had helped me understand it's all the Lord, right? So all I have to do is pray. I have to pray. I have to get into the Word. I need to listen to the wise counsel around me and just be ready, prepare. Just be ready to grow. Be ready to put stuff to the side. Be ready to take on, to walk the path that He has set before me. And I knew, obviously, everything up to this point that He was going to set a path before me. He was a light to my feet. So I knew which direction I had to go in. I just had to pay attention to, walk circumspectly and pay attention to what He wanted. Yeah.
So you've been down here now. You've been graduated school ministry for a little while. You've been down here being a blessing to all of us and walking with us and growing with us and just, serving in this church and doing what the Lord has called you to do, right? Being a trophy to Christ, being a living epistle, right? Seen and read by all men, just a boast of who He is and what He does in our lives. That is what we do, salt and light. But in the time that we have left, before we wrap up, Mason, what has been kind of you're now married, you now have a full-time job, you work at the prison, you work at Maine Correctional Center. That has been a ministry in Your wife and your marriage, your role as a husband, has been a ministry that has been completely foreign to you, as it is to all of us men in the room, or husbands in the room. But on top of that, you also have a kind of a dual ministry outside of this church with the prison. And the doors that the Lord has blown open inside of that ministry that it has become. in such a dark and evil place, so such a very liberal and kind of closed off to the gospel historically, but you have watched the Lord do what He does, and you've watched His hand of providence continue to carve a path for you to be able to shine the gospel in that prison. So between the gospel or the ministry that it is to be a husband at home and how to love her like Christ loved the church, right? Laying down our life for her above ours. Um, Quickly tell us, how has that ministry, how has the Lord prepared you for that? And also, how has the Lord prepared you for what He's been doing in that prison?
So in the school of ministry, most of this preparation happened in that period of time. And in the school of ministry, it's not necessary. I mean, period. In life, it's not really necessarily about telling people, what to do. We're getting into James 2 tomorrow night for the men's study, and in James 2, James talks about faith without works is dead, right? You have to live out your faith. So in the school of ministry, you have to lead those men from the front. It's the bulk of it is just living your life for Christ. The bulk of it is every day when you are given decisions to make, you make the decisions that align with what Christ expects, and just living out your life accordingly. So with Amanda, with the prison, the hardest part of my day is being like Christ, right? So something I have to pray about, and that's what I keep my eyes set on, is what would Christ do? What does He expect? What is right and what is wrong? How would He treat this individual? It's not necessarily normally how I would treat that individual, right? So that's why I have to keep my sights set on that. It's something I have to pray about every day. And that's what now in these ministries, learning how to be a husband, it's I can't love her the way that Christ loves her. I can't love anybody the way Christ loves them. I couldn't love the guys at CRD the way that Christ loves them. So that's something that I have to pray about all the time, because if she's not getting the love that Christ wants her to have, if they're not getting the love that Christ wants them to have, if you're not getting the love that Christ wants you to have from me, I'm not doing enough. And thankfully, it's not something I have to do on my own. It's something that He does for me. I just have to pray, align my heart with His. So, these ministries are unraveling every day. There's something new every day. I do something. I do something that I never knew. I never knew affected her in that way. I never knew that affected somebody else in that way. But the Lord has been very faithful in revealing things to me and letting me know and showing me the areas that I don't add up, and as general a way as possible. And with the prison ministry, it's a really incredible thing, because I don't know if you guys understand how it works, but as a CO, as a corrections officer, you're in the middle of the pod. They watch everything that you do. It is so important in the prison setting to treat them with decency, to treat them with respect. As a CO, you have so much authority. It's with certain people, it's not necessarily a good thing. So it's just doing nice things. How you doing? What's going on? How's your day been? Is there anything I can do for you? That simple thing. Is there anything I can do for you? Just showing somebody that you care. It's a huge thing. So in those ministries, I'm just it's the Lord Jesus Christ, His ministry on earth. It's perfection the way that He did it. And I get to read about it, and I get to try and do the same thing.
It's an amazing thing what our God does when he takes our lives and he sets them up in ways that we could never have written in a million years, and in ways that we could never have done with a million chances. But He sets them up to be able to give glory to who He is. Lest no man can boast, right? He does what none of us could ever possibly do. And He does it in ways that we could never, ever possibly even imagine that could be done. from to be able to take the logical black and white, this is what's supposed to happen, this is the result if you do this, and that's the result if you do that, and 1 + 1 = 2, and then to be able to take that and to be able to set the stage for a simple question to be sparked that forced an answer that would lead a man to the face of Christ, right? What does it mean to be moral, right? What does that mean? Well, if I want to be a good dad, what does that mean? Who sets that standard? Well, somebody has to, right? And if somebody has to set the standard, then who is it? It's certainly not a human. Well, if there is no God, that means there is no standard, but I know there's a standard, and I insist that there is one, so I got to find out where that standard comes from. And you ask those questions. These logical individuals who have set their eyes on what is in front of them their entire lives, and it's gotten them, based on the world's standards, into a pretty good position, into a pretty good life, into a life which most people, if you were to ask them what they would want, it is what the answer they would have given. Yet these searching questions, the lingering questions that would not go away, that the Lord uses to set the stage, to set a man up, to soften his heart just enough to then bear witness to a situation that his entire life had proven to him one thing, and that is that people with drug and alcohol problems don't change. And then to bear witness to the Lord changing not only the life and the external situation, but the heart and the conduct and the moral structure of individuals. It forces a man. He uses what the world and the enemy has used to guard him from Christ, and Christ will take it and he'll use it to draw him to it. It's a beautiful thing. I'm so grateful for Mason and seeing what the Lord's done in his life. I mean, I get the luxury of having the front row seat to it all. I get the luxury of having the front row seat to all of your lives. I'm so grateful to be able to watch when the Lord takes a life and to watch a life yielded to him. To watch lives that say, you know what, I've been running the show. I've been setting the course for my own life this entire time. But you have shown me everything there is to know about myself. You know me better than anybody else. And Mason testifies, I can testify, so many of us in the room can testify that as we look back on our lives and the Lord shows us where he was involved in so much, in every bit of it. We go back to these places where I didn't know who he was. I didn't show him any attention. I disregarded everything about him, yet he was still involved. He was still pulling and prodding and shaping and carving out my life in a way to set me up to be able to respond to the gospel message and to be able to accept the salvation that he freely offered to me. So to be able to look back and to be able to see that our God does not wait for our permission per se. He certainly doesn't wait for our participation, but he will set the stage from an early age, and he will put us in a spot where we then can respond to the gospel and we can allow him to do things in our lives we could never write if we got given a 1,000 chances. We'd never write a story like the one that Mason just told us, or the one that so many of us have today. So grateful for that. We're so grateful for the testimonies. So grateful for overall, more than all that, so grateful for the gospel of Christ and his working power and his grace that changes all of our lives. So I'm so grateful for you, Mason. I thank you so much for your testimony, man. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thanks, guys.